All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we're going to deep dive the NFL draft with my man Chris Sims. We're going to talk quarterback prospects, a wonky top of the board in terms of how it's expected to play out. Still no clarity about picks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. I think we've got a handle on, but after that, it's a bit of a mess. And then we'll jump into the edge prospects. We'll get into Bijan Robinson. We'll get into it all. So let's now welcome in Chris Sims, my man, my good friend.
What's up?
Mr. Sims.
Yo. What's up, Jay? Drew, thanks for having me on, man. Always good to talk to you guys. Always enjoy talking some ball.
Absolutely. All right, let's get straight into it. Chris, your number one quarterback prospect is CJ Stroud, who recently was the favorite to go number one to Carolina. That's not the case anymore. It looks like it's going to be Bryce Young at 1. At least that's what the odds would tell us. And then Stroud, it's starting to look like he may even slide past 2, past 3. So I guess what makes you so bullish on CJ Stroud, and why do you think that he might be potentially sliding?
Well, yeah, that's where, again, it gets into off the field stuff where, listen, I hear rumors about CJ Stroud there a little bit. There's been some people talk about, he asks questions or he can challenge coaching to a degree. I've heard things like that be thrown out there. I don't get into all that, Jay. You know me. I'm more about, first off, I don't know what to believe always. And really, my friends that I'm really good friends with in the NFL, they're not going to be really good friends with me if I'm calling and be like, hey, give me the scoop on every down low thing in the NFL, right? So, I know some of that, but what I do more than anything, as you guys know, is the film. And CJ Stroud, to me, 1, I think projects best to the NFL. And then 2, I thought his film was just the most impressive in college football. 1, the biggest thing is, purely right from the start is, I'm going to evaluate you and what you do in the pocket. And as a pure pocket passer, there's nobody better than CJ Stroud, in my opinion, in the draft. Decision-making is very good, high level, big time NFL throws where I'm talking, posts down the middle for 40 yards, 20-yard out routes, 20-yard in cuts into tight windows. The movement is underrated. I mean, he's very good at moving within the pocket. He's better than people give him credit for outside the pocket. And I think that's only going to get better as he continues to play. So that's why I project him as my number 1 guy. I think 1, he's the best passer right now, period. 2, I think as he improves and everything, that his style of play, I'm just most comfortable saying that projects the best of the NFL where, Bryce Young I like, but there's some things I question, and I'm not so sure I'm totally sold on it'll project.
Okay. Well, I can't really speak to his slide either because, again, I also don't really understand it because you can watch 450 games worth of film from college football last year, or you can just watch 1. And it was Georgia, Ohio State. And the singular best college football performance of the entire calendar last year was CJ Stroud against the best defense in college football last year that won the national championship.
Right.
So if you're getting that level of performance from a guy against future NFL players, I really don't know what else you need to be convinced that he can perform at the next level.
And
honestly,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
But Drew, I want to throw off of that too. And even the game before that where they lost. I mean, sure. I would love to sit down with people and watch the Michigan game and go, watch how many unbelievable plays and throws he had. They failed him in that game. He had touchdowns dropped, a 4th and 2 drop, a ball down the middle that was perfectly thrown drop. So to your point, I agree, and he was asked, to me, Stroud was the offense at Ohio State. What they asked him to do, I went, not a lot of quarterbacks are being asked to every time they drop back to make some power game-changing type throw. Where Bryce Young, again, really good, but it's screen here, RPO here, this, there. Oh, run to Gibbs up the middle. Oh, another RPO. And I'm going to go, yeah, he runs the offense good, but I don't necessarily look at some of that stuff to be very high level, like, oh, wow, only he can do that and nobody else can, along with some other factors that we'll dive into.
Yeah, so I guess I would just say exercise some patience about evaluating or just the takes that will come in year one on these quarterbacks.
You gotta be careful, right?
Yeah, because
people are throwing out bull crap right now. I mean, I sit there and go, the Raiders, I'm sure, would love for CJ Stroud to fall to number 7. Are they the ones throwing out some of this bull crap, right? That's just the kind of thing I think of when I start to hear these type of rumors start to percolate more and more.
I got a good belly laugh because something circulated yesterday where CJ Stroud, he didn't kiss the rings at the Manning camp. And for that reason, teams are out on him. And it's like, stop. Okay, but here's what I'll say. I think ultimately you're quite well because if he does slide, he ends up on a team with more assets, more talent, and maybe, opportunity to develop at the NFL level. Because a lot of times, these guys that get thrown to the wolves in year one, you're asked to learn on the fly. It's the game is moving too quickly for you. And there's only a certain number of guys that can really thrive in that kind of environment. And so being afforded the opportunity to learn a year behind, a decent starter on a team with a lot of talent is definitely a better situation. Like if Stroud ends up in, say, Seattle or Detroit or something like that, either of those teams decides we're going to swing on a prospect that we're going to sit for a year and Stroud happens to be there for those guys, I'm probably coming out of this draft saying I'm willing to bet that he ultimately will be the most successful of these guys just because of situation, because situation matters so much here. So,
I think you're right. You're right about that. I mean, situation is extremely important. And again, my rankings are off of the film I watch and how I think it projects to the NFL. If you made me do rankings on who I thought was going to be the number 1 pick, I would have gone with Bryce Young. It's all the hype. It's the Bama quarterback. You can never tell anybody that that's not the best quarterback. It goes back to Tua. People are like, I don't know. Maybe you should still take him over Burrow. Definitely over Herbert. You couldn't tell anybody that.
That did happen. Yeah.
So, exactly. Yeah. So there's, I would have bet that, he would have been the number 1 guy on a lot of teams' boards because I do think that, again, I know I'm a little more negative than most, but I think if you're not careful, you get a little too enthralled with the sexiness and the flash and look at the different releases. And as I said in my evaluation, a lot of wow releases, not a lot of wow throws when you break down Bryce Young. Very few throws with the pocket collapsing and you go, the pocket collapsing, he's got to throw a ball into a tight window. They almost don't exist, right? I know he's extremely quick and all that. He's the most well-protected quarterback in college football. Watch film. I mean, it's him back there for 7 seconds pointing, and then he gets to see a guy come at him, and then he makes a move. That's what I mean why I'm not sure if you can promise me he'll be on the best offensive line in the NFL, then okay, maybe I'll feel better about it. But, that's where I got to see it a little bit more at the NFL level to believe it and make him my number 1 guy.
Yep. Chris, you mentioned sexiness and hype. The poster boy for that at the moment is Will Levis, who is getting a lot of sexy hype. And there are people who now think that he may even go to Houston. Now, there's other stuff going on with Houston in terms of why they might not like CJ Stroud. Perhaps sharing the same agent as Deshaun Watson is contributing to that. That's a real thing. And Will Levis now, it appears that he might be the guy at number 2. Now, most people I speak to around the league are baffled that Will Levis could go in the top 10, let alone 2. What do you make of Levis?
I have a hard time buying onto that. I mean, hey, put me in that crew of somebody you talk to that knows people in the league. I would be shocked if Will Levis went number 2. I'd have, again, there's a reason I made him my number 5 ranked quarterback. I mean, inconsistencies is the word. And then here's where I would challenge the thought process, right? The new offensive coordinator from the Houston Texans, Bobby Slowick, he came from the 49ers. Do you think he really wants the guy that, it's just kind of like against what the 49ers believe in as a quarterback? The ball, strong arm, ball goes everywhere. Mechanics are everywhere. Decisions are everywhere, right? I mean, that to me just doesn't sound like, a 49ers type of guy there. That's where I thought CJ Stroud made sense for them. But you're right. There's that conversation with the agent that certainly can be a part of this. And I think really the more to the discussion there, and what I do know a little bit about is that, there's a liking in that building. And again, it's DeMeco Ryan. He's a defensive coach. what do you think he wants in year one? He wants his defense to be good. That helps solidify why they hired him. So I'm sure he'd love to get his Nick Bosa, and that would be Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. So that's really where I would see them going over Will Levis, where I would think it's crazy to take him at number 2, honestly.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion here, but I'm just trying to put the breadcrumbs together. But I have a lot of Will Levis under, because for whatever reason, every single nugget of info I get on what draft teams boards look like across the NFL, not just at the top, they have Will Levis at 2. Presumably it's because he was in like a more NFL ready offense, so he's more ready to start now. I really don't know what the reasoning behind it is, but my gut on the Texans at this moment is in division. They know Indianapolis, I think, is going to have Levis as the highest QB available left on their board. And I think their draft board was Bryce Young with a bullet, and then a big gap to the next best guy at Levis too. And for those reasons, it's a realistic, to expect that maybe Houston comes out of this draft with a quarterback answer that's not, from the college ranks, right? Like they may make a deal to bring a guy in from somewhere else around the NFL to answer that question. Because I don't think realistically you can go to that fan base and say, we're running back Davis Mills with Case Keenum as the backup. Like that's a real tough way to sell season tickets. So
I would agree with that. Yeah, and they have some wiggle room, position, to your point, Drew. They got some wiggle room because of like pick 12 that, again, let's just say if they got CJ Stroud and Hendon Hooker with a very close grade, who's to say that, okay, fine, the heck with, we'll take the defensive guy at 2. We realize CJ Stroud might be gone by the time we get to 12, but then we could think about taking Hendon Hooker, or maybe they read the draft the right way and they trade down a little bit and then take Hendon Hooker. But they got some options there, certainly. I'd be shocked if it's Will Levis. I really would be. But you never know. It only takes one. I would really think the Tyree Wilson thing is a real consideration there just because of the new coaching staff and D'Amico Ryan.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about Stroud, Levis, Young. The guy we haven't mentioned so far is Anthony Richardson, who is probably the most compelling player in the draft in a way, maybe the most mysterious, the biggest gap perhaps between his floor and ceiling. How high do you think his ceiling is, Chris? And do you think that it's such that a team could trade up to 3 potentially and take him?
I mean, his ceiling is, it's through the roof, right? I mean, it's superstar. It's, one of the 3-4 best quarterbacks in football. It's, Josh Allen on steroids, right? I mean, that's what we're talking the ceiling is here. It's like an arm that's as good as Josh Allen's and a guy that can, kind of run like Justin Fields to a degree. So that's scary. I mean, we haven't seen a combination like that. But within that is a total projection, right? So I love the upside. The floor does scare the hell out of me. I mean, he's only played 1 year, and there's a lot of moments and games and things, Drew, where you look at it and you go, oh, whoa, he's raw. He doesn't even know what he's looking at here. In fact, he's on the wrong side of the field. He should be looking over here. I mean, there's so much of that. So I am a little shocked that he's so highly regarded in NFL eyes, because he has some things on his checklist that I go, normally NFL people don't like the stuff I just explained there. I love the ceiling. I have him as my number 4 quarterback because it's a little too raw for me to just go, oh, it's definitely going to work and it's definitely going to be there. But I understand why there's love there. And then I think what also helps it out is the human factor. And anything you hear about Anthony Richardson is that everybody feels he loves football, he's a good guy, and he likes to work. So I think that makes them feel a little bit more comfortable about the rawness of the player, and that he can work on those things and get better. But I mean, it's top 10 for sure. And then if he's out there at number 4 and Stroud and Young are gone, I mean, that's another big question for me. What route do the Colts want to go on offense? Are they going to run Jalen Hurts offense, or are they going to run Shane Steichen when he was with Justin Herbert offense, right? That's really the offense he used to run, and then he realized, wait, we can't run this with Jalen Hurts, so we have to change it because he can't throw to that capacity. and he invented this offense. So that's the other unknown for me in this is just where are they going on the offensive side of the ball to then dictate what quarterback they want. I think that's another good conversation too.
A lot of what you said and a lot of what I've heard otherwise is really kind of pointing to Richardson as the ceiling being relatively Josh Allen-esque. Is that fair?
I think so. I would say that. But I would say, too, that, his film in college is more raw than Josh Allen's was.
Really?
Right?
Oh,
definitely.
boy.
Definitely. See, Josh Allen knew where to go with the ball and knew what he was doing. It's just they weren't very good, and he was like, well, I'm just going to have to fit this in there because the first two guys weren't open, and I'll just fit it in here. And then they were not good to where they gave him the green light to just do whatever he wanted. If you got to run back 50 yards and do a cartwheel or whatever, that's fine. You're our best player. Make it happen. And that got him into bad habits there too. But there was enough quarterback play where you went, wait, this guy's got a clue here. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. He just was asked to play a backyard style of football where he'd lose control of himself every now and then.
Yeah. Chris, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Right now, Will Anderson is the heavy favorite to be the first defensive player drafted. He's minus 250, but Tyree Wilson is plus 225. Yeah, which is a little confusing to me. And I know you've got Tyree as your number one edge prospect. Do you think the teams are going to share that sentiment and Tyree ultimately goes before Will Anderson in the draft?
Yeah, I do. Again, listen, I've been pretty good in my history with my defensive end ranks, all that, right? I know I've had some controversial ones in all my rankings, right? Right, where I'm the guy that liked Zach Wilson over Trevor Lawrence, right? And I knew I was in the minority there, but there were some things I liked about him, and I knew, okay, most of the NFL is going to like Trevor, but I like Zach and what I saw there. And again, until about week 7 of last year, I was right. And then things changed, and now I'm an idiot. But either way, right, this is one where I came away watching film of all the edge guys, and this wasn't like, ooh, it's really close. I just think I like Tyree Wilson more. This was like, what? This is a slam dunk. Are we even seriously having a conversation here? We're talking about a guy that's 250 that ran 4.6 and has a 1.610. And, there's really not that many impressive individual, wow, he beat him type of sacks in college football. That's the number one pick. No way. There's no way. Tyree Wilson is Myles Garrett. He's Nick Bosa. He's the freak that comes around once every 5 or 6 years. So that's where I don't even see that being a conversation. And then you add Jalen Carter into the conversation where I go, Jalen Carter is arguably the best defensive lineman I've ever evaluated in my life. I mean, there's a reason everybody was saying he was going to be the number one pick to the Bears before all the stuff went down. So I have a hard time. And I will add this to this, Jay and Drew. And again, it's not foolproof. But when I got done doing DNs, I texted some of my friends around the NFL, wait, am I missing something with Will Anderson? And the response I got back was no, we're all wondering the same thing. What is everybody? Why is he the number one pick? So, again, it only takes one, but I would be shocked if he's the first defensive guy off the board.
It's funny that you're here. Yeah. Good.
It feels like Houston have been more linked to Wilson than Anderson, and the Cardinals have been more linked to Wilson than Anderson, and they're the teams picking second and third who are likely potentially to take a defensive player. But what do you think, Drew?
I have gotten the same mail as you guys. I think Cardinals and Texans, I have heard, both have Wilson over Anderson on their boards. So if those teams stay where they are and take defensive players, Wilson would be your first defensive player off the board. I think the only scenario Anderson goes first defensive is if the first 4 picks are quarterbacks. And that requires some trades. And if you're making bets in the draft market, assuming there will be trades, I have bad news for you. You are going to lose money because it is a very, very, very terrible idea to make a bet, assuming there will be a trade. A lot of times those things do not materialize. Right. I will say that, there are people that made bad bets after the trade happened with Carolina up to number 1, assuming it was for Stroud. But all that said, the issue with Will Anderson in your mind, is it bend?
Yeah, it's just lack of overall elite explosiveness to be in that conversation for the number one pick, right? Or if you're going to be that guy, you need to have such great power that, okay, we can take a little off for the lack of bend or, great explosive speed there, right? Like his numbers were very similar to Khalil Mack, okay, as far as his combine testing numbers. But Khalil Mack if you saw Khalil Mack next to Will Anderson, they're not the same human. Khalil Mack's a guy, like when you see him, you go, wait, if I stuck a knife in him, the knife's going to bend. It's not going to hurt Khalil Mack, right? His arms and neck are like this. He's 265. He was on film throwing linemen down like, roar, roar. I mean, so that's like Will Anderson, there's not that there. Tyree Wilson, there's that there. And then there's also like, whoa, who the hell was that just flew around the edge? And like, whoa, who is that just blew up a double team block and then made the tackle 20 yards away? Like, he's a can't miss prospect. And that's where, even like what you said, Drew, with the top 4 picks maybe being quarterbacks, I think if the top 4 picks are quarterbacks, like Pete Carroll's going to put a piece of gum in his mouth and run to Kansas City to hand in the Jalen Carter card or the Tyree Wilson card. So I'd still be shocked. Okay. Anderson is not a pure lock pass rushing star in the NFL. I think he's a little bit stand-up linebacker-ish / defensive end. And that, to me, is not the number 1 pick or top guy off the board.
Okay. There's not a lot of bets you can make that are plus money right now, but I'm against the market here on Will Anderson for a lot of the reasons you've already stated. Over 3.5 is plus money. I don't get it. Somebody out there is against me. That's fine. Under on Tyree Wilson, I think, is a decent bet as well. And, that could make or break my night. We'll see.
I'm with you, too. And I might throw some damn money down on this, too. I'll tell you, I'll tell you the one thing that scares me just to a degree, right, is Arizona. Monty Ossenfort, their GM, I mean, I would think he sees it the way I do, but New England guys always scared me because they'll be like, well, he never had a mental mistake in 4 years, so I'm going to make him the number 3 pick because of that. And this guy had 3 mental mistakes, so we're going to drop him around. And I used to drive me crazy in New England. I'd be like, what? But that guy made 1,000 plays that guy didn't do jack diddly crap on. But we're going to give this guy the edge because of 3 brain farts, right? And that's where I just like that's the little inkling that scares me in the whole conversation, Drew.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but I still think Tyree is going to be the guy at the end of it.
I do too.
All right, before we hit some skill position players, a reminder to download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right, Chris, let's talk wide receivers. Considered a weak wide receiver class. Certainly been spoiled with the likes of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Justin Jefferson in recent years. And so I think that's probably inflated expectations unreasonably for rookie wideouts coming out. Jackson Smith-Njigba, he is the heavy favorite to be the first wideout off the board. You've got Zay Flowers over him, albeit in the same tier. Do you think there's any chance there could be a surprise and someone like Zay Flowers or even Quentin Johnson is the first wideout off the board?
Totally. I don't think it's crazy to say that. I can understand the NFL world liking Jackson Smith-Njigba the most. But what I can also understand is the NFL world going, wait, we're going to take a receiver at number 18 who had a hamstring injury that he didn't play for a whole year, and he ran 4.5 at his pro day, basically, right? And really a 4.5 at your pro day, add a 10th on to the combine, which would be like 4.58, 4.6, depending on who you go by, and that, that's why, one, the hamstring, that's certainly going to concern somebody. But even on the film, I like Jackson Smith-Njigba. I didn't rank it off the hamstring injury or anything. I like Jackson Smith-Njigba's ability when the ball's in his hand. I don't always love his ability to separate versus man-to-man coverage. He is a true slot guy, so he's great with you give him the 2-way cuts and all that. He's an amazing route runner. But if you just put him outside and we're like, hey, run a go route and just run by Jair Alexander. That's not going to happen. There's no way. Or, run a post route and we want you to turn around Jalen Ramsey on that. That ain't going to happen either. So that's where I can get into Zay Flowers for me, again, a little smaller, but so what? We've learned in the NFL that doesn't matter anymore. They can move these guys around and stack, bunch, slot. He's a weapon. I kind of found him to be like Kadarius Toney, but way more polished of a route runner. That's kind of how I looked at it. I certainly think there's a good chance because of the hamstring thing with Njigba that Zay Flowers can go first off the board. Quentin Johnson, those three guys, Quentin Johnson, Njigba, and Flowers, to me are the only first-round grade receivers in the draft. But I think he'll be a little later in the first round when it's all said and done. I would bet Zay Flowers is the first guy off the board.
Jay, have you heard anyone as a suitor for JSN? Because I haven't, and I really don't know why that's -4 or anything.
No,
it's the hype again.
Yeah, it just seems to be trending in that direction. But let's talk about Bijan Robinson, who has been one of the most covered prospects, certainly from like a fantasy football perspective. He's going to be the guy coming out, but a lot of it's going to depend on fit. I know that a lot of people are hoping that he finds his way all the way to the Bengals, which would be pretty ridiculous for Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Bijan Robinson. But where do you think that Bijan's ultimately going to go, Chris? What type of range, and where would you like to see him go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything you guys don't know. In a draft where there's a lack of blue chip players, I mean, this is definitely one of the 5 best players in the draft, right? Like system fit, it doesn't matter. He fits in any system. He's a freak. I mean, what do you like guys that run for touchdowns? Okay, then he fits in your system, right? Do you like guys that can run awesome routes? Yep, then he fits in your system. Now, realistically, yeah, I don't think he's going in the top 10. I don't. But, you start to get into like these teams with 2 picks, and then you start to look at the teams, I think, too, that maybe have luxury of like, wait, our team's really good, and we don't necessarily have a position we have to address right here, and this guy's too talented, right? So, I mean, there's teams where Philadelphia, because of their 2 first round or their picks or number 10 pick, that's where I could think it starts. Would they just be like, hey, F you, we're awesome, we got everything, now we got this guy, you're screwed? Like, at least that's where my brain starts in the conversation. But I think realistically, it's probably around Detroit at 18, where I would expect him to maybe have the chances to go off the board anywhere from 18 to 32, if you made me bet, is kind of where I could say that could happen. And, of course, teams with superstar running backs aren't going to be looking at it. But you mentioned it. Bengals, would the Bills do it at the end of the first round, right? Yep. The Eagles at 30 again. I think those are the teams that kind of pop into my brain.
Yep.
Key to note that those teams are all picking later than Bijan Robinson's current over-under, which has been a pretty controversial one. I've seen
what is it?
16 right now, 16 flat. And the under is juicy. But realistically, as generational as he is, the devaluation of the running back as an asset, and on top of that, like, there's a lot of good running backs that are free agents this minute. And
exactly right. They're everywhere.
There might be more coming up. Like, we realistically, like, there's going to be a musical chairs of running backs this left to be played out this offseason. And so using high-end draft capital on a running back, even if he's generational, is a real stretch. Jay, you got any final thoughts on Bijan?
No, I mean, it's interesting where, certainly in our world, Drew, talk about the running backs, and the perception is that running backs are less valuable than ever before, and running backs don't really move the line. At the same time, if you get an elite running back, like Christian McCaffrey moves the line. Like, there's 2 extremely valuable players. And I think it's probably gone too far in the opposite direction to think that, running backs are just totally replaceable by just the next guy on the depth chart. Like, not everyone has Alexander Madison right behind Dalvin Cook. Like, there is, you do suffer a drop-off if you're going from, Jonathan Taylor to, Nyheim Hines a year ago or whatever. Like,
God, this is a great point. This is a great. We're at the inflection point where having an elite running back on a 5-year deal and the compensation they're getting is probably maybe plus EV. especially if you can get him in the second half of round 1. Oh, this is very fair. I completely agree with this.
Yeah, and the thing is as well is when you add the receiving element, that's what takes you to the next level, because then you got to start valuing running backs like McCaffrey, like Eckler, as though they're wide receivers in a way. And so those players are extremely valuable. So I wonder if there will be an overcorrection where, eventually, guys, running backs typically who would have slid to, the second round, Bijan maybe goes earlier than we think. But certainly it'll be one to watch. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, mate. Always love chatting ball. Can you tell people what you're working on the next week leading up to the draft?
Well, it's still all mock draft Monday. I got that coming on Chris Sims Unbuttoned, my podcast. So we'll be doing that, Wednesday. Some ask me anything type of stuff going into the draft. And then during the draft, we'll be making live videos, through NBC Sports, kind of just live, to tape kind of reactions to each pick. Going to be doing that. But, at CSimsQB on Twitter, at Sims Unbuttoned on Instagram, and PFT with Florio and the Chris Sims Unbuttoned podcast. That's where you can find me in all things NBC, just like you, Drew and Jay. That's what we do.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it doesn't sound like you're working on much, so hopefully we can put some more stuff on your plate. But anyway, appreciate the time, Chris. Speak to you soon, man.
Always. Be good, guys. Have a good one. Happy 420.
Cheers. Yeah. Thanks, mate. All right. Before we close out with some final thoughts, every season is draft season. Drew, get your Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your football, baseball, and basketball drafts packed with profiles, rankings, projections. Order today and get all 3 Rotoworld Draft Guides for the price of 2. Plus, use promo code BUNDLE5 and save an extra $5 at checkout. All right. Last draft thoughts before the weekend. Drew, anything that you're particularly nervous about, that you're particularly excited for in terms of the market? I still think the draft really starts at 2. And
100%.
I think my big thing is that it's starting to feel more and more like I really thought for a while that it was going to be 4 quarterbacks, first 4 picks. I now feel much, much less strongly about that. And it feels like the evaluations, particularly on Stroud, are less bullish than we expected, and that it now perhaps wouldn't be shocking, particularly with the fact that Trey Lance and Mac Jones seem available, that perhaps these teams because we were thinking well, Houston, they can't go into next year with Davis Mills as their quarterback. Well, maybe that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can't take Tyree Wilson too and just get Mac Jones or Trey Lance or something, or Lamar Jackson or whatever. So I'm thinking that it's perhaps more and more likely that we do see defensive players, at least one, go 2 or 3. But certainly it's in play that, 2 and 3 are both defensive players, I guess. But what do you think?
Yeah. My expectation of the entire draft depends on what the Texans do at 2. It's crystallizing in one of 2 different paths. The Texans take Levis at 2, or the Texans take defense at 2. If it goes Levis, if they ultimately decide we don't like the we don't like the ask for Lance, we don't like the ask for Jones, we don't want to use pick 12 on Hooker, then I think they may ultimately settle on, okay, let's take QB2 on our board, who is Levis, and we'll just be, that's our plan. If that happens, then all of a sudden the value of trading up to 3 for a team like the Titans is enormous, because they have eyes for Richardson, and they think now you can't let Richardson go to a draft opponent, a divisional opponent like the Colts. So you are now incentivized to give up a lot to move up to the 3 spot with the Cardinals. Richardson would go 3, and then I have no idea what the Colts do at 4 at that point. They presumably would take Stroud, but if they, just didn't feel like they had a good enough visit with him, maybe they decide on a plan B like Lance or a plan B like Lamar. And so, I think, Levis going 2 makes Richardson go 3 and makes all the defenders slide. Then the flip side of the coin is if the Texans elect to keep the 2, draft a defensive player, be it Anderson or Wilson, it doesn't really matter. Then the Cardinals have no leverage with the 3. They take a defender, and then Levis goes 4 to the Colts. And then at that point, Seahawks maybe don't have the player that they were really hoping for defensively. Maybe they swing away on a guy like Richardson, who's a developmental prospect. So I think realistically, we're going to get an answer one way or the other of what the Texans are going to do this weekend. And when that happens, the value on the board is going to be bang, 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 one of these two scenarios. And so that's kind of what I have my finger on the trigger ready to fire away once we kind of know what the Texans are going to do.
Yeah, I think right now the best bet on the board is, like we talked about with Chris, is Tyree Wilson plus 225. I think there's even some bigger prices out there than that to be the first defensive player drafted. I think that by margin is the best bet right now. But last one for you before we sign out. The number 2 pick right now, there are 4 guys bunched between plus 200 and plus 300, which tells you that no one has any idea what is happening with that pick, which leads me to ask, is there any chance Anthony Richardson just goes 2? He's 18 to 1, and it feels like he is the highest ceiling prospect in the draft. And the reason that his odds are longer is just because no one has linked him to a team where no one knows what that team is doing anyway. So why is he 18 to 1?
Sure. No, you're pointing out probably something we should have said a long time ago on this show, which is there are 2 plus EV strategies for betting the draft. You have information and you lay a big price, and you only got to let that bankroll sit there for a week, or you take some extreme wild card shots because there is so much unknown, and because it is such a dynamic situation, and because you really have no idea that if the Texans are even going to make that pick at 2. So it doesn't really matter what their board looks like, right? Like, just the fact that people know that the 3 and the 2 are available and they can go up and get a guy like Richardson to develop him is not crazy at all. So yeah, Richardson at 18 to 1 is, if you want to take a long shot price, get a decent payday for something insane to happen. I'm not stopping you. But I think the other side of that coin of, I'm waiting for info because I want to lay the prices and just know that it's correct in the draft for the most part. And I see stuff on the board right now like offensive linemen. The over under is 5.5, and it's like minus 200-ish or something like that.
Yep.
There's good. The floor for offensive linemen in round 1, in my opinion, is 6. So I don't mind laying a -2 anything on over 5.5 offensive linemen. The entirety of the middle and late part of round 1, as far as I can tell you, once the elite edges are gone, once the quarterbacks are gone, there's no wide receivers people are super fired up about. Those guys are going to slide into round 2. I don't think there's going to be a second running back. People are way, way, way too high on the tight ends. Tight end is just not a premium enough position to spend round 1 talent, even if these guys are very good. So offensive linemen are going to go in the first round, and cornerbacks are going to go in the first round. And I think over on both of those are fun bets.
Yep, I like that. Yeah, I think that with a lot of these draft bets, particularly as you get closer, like some of the best bets I've ever placed were Anthony Edwards to go 1 day of the draft at like minus 270. It's just completely done. Like, it's just completely done. It's minus 270. And then after Woj finally tweeted out, like 3 minutes before the draft, that Paolo was going to go 1, you could still bet Paolo at like minus 350 to go 1. And it was just, again, completely done at that point. So those type of bets. I think last year I bet Aiden Hutchinson to go 2 at minus 110, 5 minutes before the draft. Like, that kind of stuff will be out there. But now I think, particularly when there's just lack of consensus, now is the time to be more placing bets on long shots that have a coherent path. Like the consensus was, for the most part, that Bryce Young was the best quarterback prospect, and he's going 1. And the consensus seems to be that Anthony Richardson is the highest ceiling prospect of anyone, including Bryce Young, and no one has any idea what's happening at 2. So 18 to 1 for the highest ceiling prospect at the most important position in the sport seems like a reasonable bet. But anyway, see what happens. All right.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wages. Please rate and subscribe us if you're listening to us in podcast form. Thanks to those watching on the YouTube channel, NBC Sports. Thanks to Chris Sims for joining us, from Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.